Welcome to the Connecting with DZ video series. Our next topic is mentorship and advice for learners. We can all think of mentors and advocates we've had in our careers that help shape the people we are and the professionals we become. How do we provide and receive mentorship in the most appropriate manner? Today we have a discussion with DZ on his approach to mentorship and his advice for early career professionals and students.
So DZ, I know that you have had a lot of mentors in your life and in your career. Tell us about the mentors that influenced you early in your career that led you to even entering pharmacy as a profession.
Yeah, okay. So I was in medical school for a while, and then H. pylori got me, and I had a very, very bad bleeding ulcer. And so I took off and then drove cross-country semi for a year and kind of thought through my life what it would be. So then I was readmitted to the medical school and started to get flare-up. And so I got to know the associate dean of the medical school quite well during that time, and he said, well, gee, you got a good background with science and everything, you ought to apply it. Maybe you ought to be a pharmacy a medical researcher. So he took me over to introduce me to Louis Bussey, who was the associate dean of the pharmacy school. We sat down, the deans off came in, and the four of us sat there a little while, and they kind of convinced me pharmacy was the way to go. I had all the prerequisites and everything, so decided that pharmacy would fit in terms of helping people with health. That's sort of where I was at that time. So that's what got me into the pharmacy world early on. You know, when you talk about mentoring a little bit, I always differentiate, is this a coaching relationship or a mentor relationship? And how I break them down is coaching is how do you make this person good in this game that they're playing now based on what you know. Asking the unasked questions that they may not have thought about. So that's the coach. Mentoring is, should you change ball games? Should you give up football and go into swimming or something like that? So you're looking at the mentoring as as a different relationship where people are. So people that are sort of at an ops level, moving to strategy, maybe there's some things that we can discuss. This should be an ongoing thing. That's number one. Number two, the chemistry's got to fit. Either it is there or it isn't, and I can't describe it any simpler than that. The other thing is it's a two-way street. When I connect with people, I always want to learn what's going on. Not to be snoopy, but to just understand what the current environment is, what's the work activities that they're dealing with, that, it's a different era. So to me, it's always kind of keeps me up to date in those interactions. And then I hope in exchange for that, the experiences that I've had over the years, there may be some pearl or, maybe you ought to try this. Have you thought about this kind of question with the relationship? The last thing that I think is really important, be very careful that you don't become beholding, either one of you, because that can lead to disaster. And I've seen it over the years, that either a resident becomes too dependent or a young person, staff or so, on a mentor, that they get locked into expectations that are not in their best interest. And the same the other way, they owe me kind of thing. So as the relationship's going on, stop time to time to think, am I getting into a beholding relationship that's not good for either one of us going forward?
So that was great distinctions between coaching and mentorship and how you apply them. That cumulative career years influence idea, what do you think about that?
Okay, so it came to me during one of the Board of Visitors meeting that everything we're talking about isn't just about a single person. It's an accumulative year phenomenon. So if you have 400 or 100 pharmacy students at that PharmD's level, they got 43 years, a career in front of them. You have 100 of them. How many career cumulative years is your discussion influencing you? If you think in that level, then you get away from a lot of the current minutia, and you think, what's it going to be 5 years from now? with 100 of these folks, well-trained, educated. So you put it, to me anyway, it framed each discussion issue very different when you added all the people. If you have a seminar of 10 and it's 45 years, say a resident, that's 450 years, you're investing 1 hour. So make it as helpful as you can in terms of their career years potential. And so then you think very different. Is the current career package position going to be there? Probably not. So how should your discussions go that'll help them kind of start to think of the next level of thinking?
It also puts the pressure on as a lecturer, thinking about the consequences if you screw that up.
Exactly. And it is kind of daunting. When I meet with resident groups, I think about that. You know, this is 1 hour, 4 of them. It's 160 years, 180 years, potentially, we're impacting. Because usually we're just too short, too narrow a view. So I think it helps expand your mind. It helps me anyway to frame that thing. So some people may think that's another one of the RDIs, but...
No, not a really dumb idea. Something that I think really does help also reprioritize, like, how you're going to engage in that conversation or your willingness to do so. One other question we had is explain the idea of when the student is ready, the teacher always rises, and how that influences mentorship.
Yeah, well, that comes from the Eastern cultures. Buddha, I believe it was a Buddha type thing, that when you're really in, let's call it deep doo-doo with an issue, and if you have faith, the answer always seems to come up, the right answer. And you never know where or who or how. And so you look at the printed word, what you see on the video or TV, there's almost always some answer to an issue you're dealing with. And so I kind of frame it, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher always shows up. You just don't know what forum, or are you going to miss the message?
So any advice that you would have for early mentorship relationships, pitfalls we should avoid, or things that can help connect people early?
No, I think, don't be shy about reaching out to people. There's people with a lot of experience. They're willing to share those with you. And you can spot early on if they are or if they don't care to. So you can't force it. That's pretty obvious. With me, I've had 5 big ones in my life that I'd call mentors. First one was probably Paul Parker. And when in the pharmacy world, he was the one that always kind of pointed the way. The second one was a hospital administrator. As I got into more hospital administration things, multiple departments that I was accountable for, CEO I connected with. It was my go-to person. When I got to the academic world, it was a dean that I went to. So, and in the UHC, former commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. And I knew it, and I think they knew it. So those were kind of the 5 as my career changed into 5 kind of different spheres.
So you've been around almost 8.5 decades. Are you saying that a lot of your professional success has been due to the impact mentors have had on you?
Oh, sure. Yep. Because, I would have had quite a different path if it weren't for Parker. I can tell you that. I would have handled things very different when I was in the administrative role. Had I not had that person to talk to, I would have never got into the academic side of things. I just didn't have kind of an interest if it wasn't for the dean. And then the last, it was the UHC era where I had to learn, where does the medical policy, medical philosophy, where does that all fit research, and then how does it tie to pharmacy? So, in each of the phases of life, and I think I might add one other was Joe Otis in terms of the association world. I kind of looked at him as a mentor. He always seemed to have a pearl that I needed in a situation that I wouldn't have thought of had I not had that kind of a quasi-personal relationship with a person.
So find a mentor, be a mentor, is your advice.
At all times. Yep, John Gans, that was his statement. I remember it very well, that have one and be one, because you need both to do either well. So.
Great advice. So, time with DZ, leaders like DZ should not just be informational and inspirational, it should also bring joy. So a couple other questions for you in that regard pertaining to mentorship. What has your relationship with residents and past residents through the years meant to you, both personally and professionally?
It's part of the family. You know, I guess if you want to look at it, that it's pretty significant. I have calls, I'd say 3 to 4 nights a week now, many with past residents from over the years. And so it's kind of, I guess it's professional family. It's kind of hangs in there, and it's important to me. You know, there's a lot of other things I can do, but it sort of stimulates my thinking differently by having that kind of ongoing relationship. Keeps me tied kind of to the professional activities and the issues that I otherwise would not get. And, you know, I hope in exchange, you know, the variety of life experiences and exposures that, you know, come up during those discussions are helpful to them.
So you feel you've gained as much through those relationships as they've gained from you?
More. Much more.
And you've mentored probably not just hundreds, probably thousands of residents throughout your career, formally and informally. So last question I have for you is, what have been the attributes of some of your favorite and least favorite residents you've worked with?
Well, I wouldn't say I've mentored thousands. I've coached maybe thousands. I've probably mentored what I would consider in my category 25 or 30 that I would call mentored. I think candidness, you know, this is what's really on my mind, you know, none of the fluff stuff, you know, I think that's always been of value to me. The other thing is to see there's always a kind of an ongoing sustained contribution. My sense is, how do I make things better in my job and activities? That I think has been pretty important to me over the years. The least, I suspect I couldn't come up with any because I just don't associate with people that I don't have, you know, any respect to, and they probably feel the same with me. So, you know, I don't have any that I can say really anything really negative about. You know, everybody's got his career and life path, and so I'm not in a position to judge the good or the bad. You know, there's some I wouldn't have done that, or, you know, and you know, that was foolish, but go ahead, you know, if you want it. So, yeah, I can't come up with anything that I got a negative about any of the former.
Well, I would say that's classic DZ. Don't ever look at any situation as good or bad, but look at everything in terms of what the opportunity is and how can you make them and make that situation better. So.
That's exactly right. Any bad situation passes with time unless somebody wants to keep it alive. And so get over it.